Get her out of here, now! She doesn't belong in this wedding, and neither does that child. The words cracked through the golden ballroom like thunder, followed by gasps and silence. Guests in silk gowns and tailored suits watched as the woman in the black uniform was dragged across the marble floor. Her sleeve torn, her child screaming, blood trickling down her arm. She didn't come for trouble. She only came to work, quiet, invisible, forgotten. But when her toddler cried, and they dragged her bleeding across the ballroom floor, the world turned away. Until one man walked in, a billionaire, and said just 5 words that changed everything. Do not touch her again. What happened next? The phone rang late in the afternoon, slicing through the silence of Rachel Monroe's small apartment like a cold breeze. She glanced at the screen, her breath catching in her throat. Vanessa Kingsley, her half-sister. A name that hadn't lit up her phone in months, maybe even a year. Rachel hesitated, her thumb hovering over the answer button. She already felt the old ache creeping in. She picked up anyway. Rachel, Vanessa's voice came through crisp and detached, like a receptionist delivering bad news. I'm getting married next week. Rachel blinked, stunned. Oh, I hadn't heard. Congratulations. Yeah, thanks, Vanessa replied flatly, already moving past the pleasantries. Look, we're short-staffed for the reception. I figured I'd offer you a chance to work. You need it, right? Rachel's stomach tightened. She blinked again, trying to process. You want me to be staff at your wedding? Don't make it weird, Vanessa said quickly, as if annoyed that Rachel had the nerve to question it. You're not coming as a guest. Just help with serving, clearing plates, refilling glasses. You know, what you're used to. Rachel stared at the wall above her sink, her reflection faint in the dusty mirror. She didn't answer right away. There's a uniform, obviously, Vanessa added. All black. Arrive 2 hours early. Oh, and keep Eli at home. We don't need distractions. The call ended before Rachel could say another word. She stood there for a long time, the silence ringing louder than the phone ever had. Eli, her 2-year-old son, was curled up on the couch, clutching his beige stuffed rabbit. He looked so small, so peaceful, so unaware of how the world sometimes placed a value on people based on bloodlines, and sometimes in spite of them. Rachel didn't care about Vanessa's mockery. She didn't care about being treated like a stranger by someone who shared her blood. What she cared about, what made her finally whisper yes into that silence, was one small, aching hope, that Eli might, even from a shadowed corner, catch a glimpse of what a family celebration was supposed to look like. Even if it wasn't for them. Even if it would break her a little to stand on the outside again. Rachel arrived 2 hours early, just like the instructions had said. The entrance to the wedding venue was framed with ivory drapes and glowing lanterns, and inside the air smelled of expensive perfume and imported roses. Music from a live string quartet drifted through the corridors, elegant, timeless, distant. She wore her assigned black blouse and slacks, her blonde hair pulled into a tight bun. No makeup, no jewelry, nothing that could draw attention. The moment she stepped through the back entrance marked staff only, she stopped being a sister and started being invisible. No one greeted her. A coordinator with a clipboard handed her a name tag without even looking up, then gestured toward the linen station with a flick of her pen. Rachel moved through the elegant chaos with practiced silence, folding napkins, polishing champagne flutes, lining up silverware with a precision born not of pride, but necessity. She kept her head down, eyes averted, voice quiet. Around her, waiters buzzed like bees in black and white uniforms. Guests began trickling in, men in tuxedos, women in gowns that shimmered under the chandeliers. Laughter bubbled like champagne, rising above the music. And Rachel, once part of this family, however fragile that bond had been, stood among them like wallpaper. She spotted Vanessa briefly across the ballroom, radiant in her custom gown. Her laughter rang like crystal glass chimes, effortless and empty. She didn't even glance in Rachel's direction. That somehow hurt more than if she had sneered. As the reception picked up, Rachel slipped into a corner to fold another stack of linen napkins. Her hands moved automatically, her eyes scanning nothing. until a soft voice broke the rhythm. "Excuse me," a well-dressed older woman asked gently. "Aren't you the bride's sister?" Rachel froze. The napkin in her hands stilled. She opened her mouth, unsure whether to lie or smile or run. But before she could speak, a familiar voice sliced through the room like a cold wind. "She was," Vanessa said, appearing from nowhere, holding a flute of champagne in one hand and a smile sharp enough to draw blood. "Used to be. Now she's just staff." Rachel's spine stiffened. The room didn't fall silent, but it shifted. Several heads turned. Someone coughed. Another guest sipped their wine with studied interest. Rachel didn't look at Vanessa. She didn't defend herself. She simply returned to folding napkins with trembling fingers. "She's used to being overlooked," Vanessa added sweetly, tossing her hair over one shoulder. "Right, Rachel?" There was laughter from a nearby table. Soft, awkward, cruel. Rachel said nothing, because in a ballroom full of silk and silver, her silence was the only dignity she had left. The clink of silverware and the hum of classical music filled the ballroom. Rachel kept her head down as she moved between tables, balancing a tray of empty glasses with the ease of someone used to being overlooked. No one spoke to her. No one thanked her. That was fine. She didn't come here for acknowledgement. She only wanted her son to see something beautiful, even if it wasn't meant for them. But then the silence was broken, not by music, not by clinking glasses, but by a small, bright voice echoing across the marble floors. "Mama!" Rachel turned, her heart skipping a beat. There he was, Eli. Her son had slipped away from the kitchen staff who had been watching him, his little legs carrying him clumsily across the polished floor, shoes squeaking, arms wide open as he ran through the center of the ballroom. His smile was pure joy, his innocence unfiltered. He reached her and threw his arms around her legs, clinging tightly. Gasps rippled through the room. Then came the laughter. "Oh my God, she brought her kid to work. Staff and entertainment. That's a 2-for-1. Rachel crouched down and scooped Eli into her arms, pressing his head against her chest to calm his breathing, and her own. She whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart." But her voice was shaky. Her cheeks burned as she rose slowly, her child in her arms, eyes darting around the room. No one smiled kindly. No one offered help. They just watched, bemused, amused, disgusted. From across the room, Letitia Graham stormed forward. The wedding planner's heels clicked like gunshots on the floor. "This is a wedding, not a daycare," Letitia snapped. "You were told to keep that child out of sight." I, I didn't mean, he just..." "Enough. Get them out. Now." Rachel blinked. "Please," she said quietly. "He didn't mean any harm. He's just a little boy." But Letitia had already waved to 2 nearby security guards. Rachel backed up instinctively, hugging Eli tighter. His face turned, confused by the sudden shift in energy, by the cold eyes surrounding him. One of the guards took a step forward. Rachel shifted her body to shield her son. "Please," she repeated. "He's just a baby." But no one stepped in. Not a single guest. Not a family member. Not her father. She looked to the tables full of polished strangers and familiar faces twisted by judgment, and saw nothing but apathy. Even the ones who looked guilty looked away. Letitia crossed her arms. "If you won't leave willingly, we'll make sure you do." Rachel swallowed hard, her breath hitching. And in that moment, surrounded by wealth and cruelty, a mother stood still, not out of defiance, but out of love. Because no matter how many people laughed or pointed, she refused to let her son see her break. The staff lounge was dim and quiet, a stark contrast to the glittering chaos just outside its door. Rachel sat on a worn bench, Eli curled beside her, his head resting on her lap, the soft rhythm of his breathing anchoring her in the middle of the storm. She unfolded a napkin and revealed a small corner of wedding cake, just enough frosting and sponge to make her son smile. Eli clapped softly, giggling as she handed it to him, crumbs already collecting on his fingers. Rachel smiled, though her eyes remained tired. Then the door creaked open. A man stepped inside, dressed in a tailored navy suit, clearly a guest, but not someone she recognized. He paused, watching the quiet scene with curiosity rather than judgment. He smiled kindly and approached. "That your boy?" he asked, his voice low and gentle. Rachel nodded slowly. "Yes, he's adorable," the man said, reaching into his inner pocket. He pulled out a folded bill and extended it toward her. "Buy him something sweet later." Rachel blinked, caught off guard. She glanced at the money, then back at him. There was no malice in his offer, no condescension, but Rachel had learned to hear what wasn't spoken. She shook her head, her voice soft but firm. "Thank you, but no." "Son," he tilted his head, surprised. "It's just a gift." She met his gaze. "I'm not selling myself just because we're hungry." The words fell heavy in the air, not loud but clear, calm, dignified. The man froze for a beat, then nodded respectfully and tucked the bill away. He left without another word. What none of them realized, what Rachel couldn't possibly know, was that a wedding photographer had been passing by the open doorway at that exact moment. He snapped a photo. A mother holding her child, cake in one hand, refusing money with quiet grace. He posted it later with a simple caption. "Some dignity can't be bought. Remember her." Within hours, the image would spread like wildfire. Within days, it would divide the internet. And within a week, it would change Rachel's life forever. By the time the photo went viral, Rachel had returned quietly to her duties. But her absence from the spotlight didn't go unnoticed, especially not by Vanessa Kingsley. In the lounge, one of the bridesmaids shoved a phone under Vanessa's nose, whispering urgently. The screen displayed the now famous image, Rachel gently refusing money while her son clung to her side. The caption read, "Some dignity can't be bought." The comments were relentless. "Who lets their own sister work at their wedding? She looks like a guest of honor, not hired help. Shame on the bride." Vanessa's perfectly glossed smile vanished. "She's hijacking my wedding with her sob story," she snapped, pacing back and forth. "She made me look heartless." Moments later, Rachel was wiping frosting from Eli's chin when Vanessa stormed into the lounge. "You think you're some saint now?" she hissed. "The poor little waitress who turned down a tip for her bastard child? You're humiliating me in front of everyone." Rachel stepped in front of Eli instinctively, voice calm. "I didn't ask for attention. I was just feeding my son," Vanessa scoffed. "Well, you fed enough. Get out." Before Rachel could respond, Eli toddled forward, still sticky-fingered and giggling. His foot caught on the edge of a decorative rug near the lounge door. He stumbled straight into a passing waiter and a full tray of water. Crystal glasses shattered on the marble floor. A cascade of cold water splashed across Vanessa's pristine designer gown. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then Vanessa screamed, "My dress! You ruined it! This is a $12,000 Sense gown!" Guests nearby gasped, turning to look. Letitia Graham marched in, her face sharp as a blade. "What happened?" "She threw water on me!" Vanessa shrieked, pointing furiously at Rachel. "She's sabotaging everything." Rachel raised her hands. "I didn't. He tripped. It was an accident." Letitia's jaw clenched. "Enough. Get them out. Now." Two security guards approached. "No, please," Rachel begged, backing away with Eli in her arms. Letitia's voice was cold and final. "You and that child have no place here." This time no one hesitated, and the cruelty was no longer subtle. The grand double doors of the ballroom creaked open, the cold night air rushing in like a warning. Rachel stumbled forward, cradling Eli, her uniform soaked and torn, her elbow still bleeding. Her feet scraped against the marble as the guards pushed her closer to the exit. The laughter inside had faded. Now there was only the sound of her child's whimpers, and the deafening silence of people too afraid or too proud to intervene. One of the guards reached for the handle to push open the last door to the street. That's when it happened. A sleek black luxury sedan pulled up outside. The headlights washed over Rachel and Eli, momentarily bathing them in stark white light. The car door opened with precision. Out stepped a man in a charcoal gray suit. His posture was calm, but his eyes were fire. Every step he took toward the entrance sent invisible ripples through the stunned crowd. Murmurs began to rise. "Is that Gabriel Hartman?" Yes, Gabriel Hartman, billionaire CEO, silent financier of the venue, caterer, florist, and, as fate would have it, witness to everything that had just transpired. He walked with quiet power, cutting through the awkward silence until he reached the doorway, until he saw her. Rachel, disheveled, bruised, crying, but standing. Do not touch her. The command stopped everyone cold. The guards froze mid-motion. Letitia's lips parted, unsure if she should argue or bow. Vanessa stepped forward, red-faced, confused. Gabriel walked past them all and knelt beside Rachel, gently placing a folded silk pocket square on her injured elbow. Then he looked up at her, not with pity, but with something far deeper. "Are you all right?" Rachel blinked in disbelief. "Gabriel, what are you doing here?" He rose to his feet and, in full view of every guest, lifted Eli into his arms with ease. The little boy clung to him instinctively, as if he already knew. Then Gabriel turned to the room, his voice calm and clear. "Rachel Monroe is the mother of my future child." A collective gasp swept the hall. And just like that, the woman they'd laughed at was no longer a shadow. She was everything they couldn't ignore. The ballroom, once buzzing with chatter and laughter, was now utterly silent. All eyes were on Gabriel Hartman, standing tall beneath the golden chandeliers, with Rachel beside him and Eli nestled safely in his arms. Letitia took a step forward, trying to regain control. "Excuse me, Mr. Hartman, but this is a private—" Gabriel raised a hand calmly, silencing her without a word. Then he turned to the crowd, his voice steady, but unmistakably cold. "Let me be very clear," he said. "Rachel Monroe is not just some waitress. She is not a mistake, not a disruption, and certainly not an embarrassment." He glanced briefly at Vanessa, whose jaw clenched, then back to the room. "She's the woman I love, the mother of my future child, and if anyone here insults her again, I will personally pull every contract tied to this wedding. That includes the venue, the caterer, the florist, the wine selection, and the honeymoon suite. Every one of them was funded by me." Gasps rose. Chairs shifted. A ripple of panic flowed through the elite crowd. But Gabriel wasn't finished. He looked at Rachel, then turned back to the guests, his voice softening just slightly. "You all see me as a man of wealth and power, but none of that ever gave me peace." He paused, remembering. "Over a year ago, I walked into a restaurant kitchen undercover, dressed like a line cook, part of an internal audit. I wanted to see how the staff treated someone who had nothing to offer. Most ignored me, some were rude, but one woman stopped what she was doing, handed me half her muffin, and asked if I was okay." He looked directly at Rachel, his eyes glinting with quiet reverence. "She didn't know who I was. She didn't care. She just saw someone who looked tired, and she helped." The room was frozen. Then somewhere in the back, someone began clapping, then another, and another. Soon the ballroom erupted into applause, not polite but heartfelt. Rachel stood motionless, stunned, as strangers rose to their feet, not to mock her, but to honor her. In that moment, she wasn't the outcast. She was the queen of the room. As the applause slowly faded, all eyes turned to Rachel. Gabriel gently placed a hand on her back, then stepped aside. A microphone stood near the front of the room, still live, still waiting. Rachel hesitated. Her hands trembled slightly, the patched tear in her sleeve still visible beneath the silk handkerchief Gabriel had tied there. But then she took a breath and stepped forward. The ballroom stilled once again, quieter than ever before. She looked out at the sea of faces, some regretful, some ashamed, others watching with a kind of awe she had never received in her life. She adjusted the mic. Her voice was soft, but unwavering. "My name is Rachel Monroe," she began. "Most of you didn't know that before today. To some of you, I was just the woman behind the table, the help. To others, I was an embarrassment, a burden, a story you whispered over champagne." She paused, then looked toward the back of the room, toward the corner where she had folded napkins just hours ago. "I don't need titles. I don't need pity. I never came here to ruin anything. I only came because I wanted my son to see what family looked like, even if it wasn't ours." Her eyes glistened, but she stood tall. "I came to work quietly, to be invisible. But my son, he's too young to understand invisibility. He saw music and lights and laughter and wanted to run toward it. That's not shameful. That's hopeful. She looked down at Eli, who was now in Gabriel's arms, resting his head against the man's chest. I don't need to be at your tables to know my worth. I just wanted to feed my son. But today, just today, I asked for something more. She swallowed. I asked for respect, not favor, not charity, just dignity. A hush fell again, heavier than before. No murmurs, no clinks of silverware, only the sound of a few sniffles and rustling linen. Then a voice cracked through the silence. I should have protected you. Rachel turned. It was Derek Saunders, her father, the man who had sat in silence for most of her life. His face was pale, eyes red, lips trembling. I let others decide how I treated my own daughter, he said, voice thick with guilt. I was weak, and I'm sorry, Rachel. From the bottom of my soul, I'm sorry. Rachel blinked, stunned. Her heart raced. Before she could respond, a tiny pair of hands reached forward. Eli wiggled out of Gabriel's arms, toddled over, and tugged on the microphone stand. Gabriel helped lower it for him. With a gummy smile and bright, curious eyes, Eli leaned in and blurted out, Daddy! A gasp rose from the crowd. Some mouths opened. Others softened into tears. Rachel froze. Gabriel did too. And then the room erupted, not in shock, but in something deeper. Applause, laughter, warmth. The word that little boy had spoken, simple, honest, pure, had shattered every wall of judgment in that room. Eli ran back into Gabriel's arms, giggling as the billionaire held him close, eyes damp with emotion. Rachel looked on, stunned, and for the first time in years, truly, deeply seen. What happened inside that ballroom didn't stay within its gilded walls. By the next morning, footage from the wedding had gone viral. Multiple angles, from guest cell phones, the photographer's lens, even security footage, stitched together a narrative no one could ignore. The story wasn't about a bride and groom. It was about a waitress, her child, and the billionaire who stood for them. Rachel Monroe's name was everywhere. Social media exploded with hashtags like Respect for Rachel, From Waitress to Queen, and Meals with Mama. Meanwhile, Vanessa Kingsley's carefully curated influencer career crumbled in real time. Comment sections turned against her, brand deals vanished overnight, and a viral remix of her, quote, she used to be, now she's just staff, became a symbol of elitism gone wrong. Letitia Graham, once the darling of high society event planning, was quietly blacklisted. Sponsors withdrew, contracts were canceled, and past videos of her condescending behavior resurfaced, forcing her out of the industry she once dominated. But while others fell, Rachel rose. Gabriel Hartman held a press conference days later, announcing the launch of the Rachel Grace Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting single mothers with job training, childcare, and education grants. Women like Rachel don't need saving, Gabriel told the crowd. They need opportunity. They deserve respect. But Rachel didn't stop there. With a borrowed phone and a secondhand tripod, she uploaded her first video to a channel she nervously named Meals with Mama Rachel. In it, she stood in a modest kitchen, Eli perched on the counter beside her, laughing as he dipped a spoon into soup. I used to wash dishes here, she said into the camera, but tonight I'm making dinner for anyone who needs comfort on a hard day. That single video hit over 2 million views within a week. She didn't wear makeup. She didn't pretend. She cooked. She told stories. She reminded people of home. Within a month, brands reached out, not with flashy sponsorships, but heartfelt collaboration offers. Her audience grew, not because she had been humiliated, but because she had remained human through it all. Rachel Monroe was no longer background noise in someone else's story. She had become a voice for thousands, and this time, the world listened. There were no chandeliers, no towering cakes, no paparazzi, just a garden. Wildflowers peeked between the stones, fairy lights twinkled in the trees, and a handful of loved ones sat in wooden chairs, encircling the couple that had weathered a storm together. Rachel Monroe stood beneath an arch of ivy and jasmine, wearing a soft linen dress that moved gently with the breeze. No veil, no diamonds, just the glow of someone who had healed. Beside her, Gabriel Hartman looked more like a man in love than a billionaire CEO. His sleeves were rolled just slightly, a crooked daisy pinned to his lapel, handpicked that morning by Eli. And there between them was Eli, their ring bearer, walking forward with all the seriousness a toddler could muster, carrying a small satin pillow with two simple silver bands. Gabriel knelt, not because tradition demanded it, but because his heart did. "You've already given me more than I thought I'd ever deserve," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "You gave me hope, a family, a reason to come home." Rachel's eyes shimmered as she knelt with him, so they were eye to eye. She took his hand and whispered back, "Even strong women need soft places to fall." He smiled through the tears, and when they kissed, it wasn't dramatic, it was real. Eli clapped. The guests stood in quiet applause. In that moment under the starlit sky, there were no titles, no cameras, no judgment, only love. The kind that's chosen, not because it's perfect, but because it endures. In today's world, where titles and appearances are often mistaken for worth, Rachel's story reminds us of something far more enduring. True dignity isn't given, it's lived. We live in a culture that often overlooks quiet strength, but people like Rachel walk among us every day, single parents doing their best, elders holding families together, children seeing truth where adults see nothing. And sometimes, all it takes is one moment, one person who says enough to change everything. Gabriel didn't fall for wealth or status. He fell for character, for kindness, for the woman who shared her last muffin without expecting anything in return. So now we ask you, have you ever been overlooked for who you really are? Have you ever stood up for someone others ignored? Tell us in the comments. Let's make this more than a story. Let's make it a community where empathy matters. Thank you for watching this story to the very end. If it moved you, made you think, or even brought a tear to your eye, please like, subscribe, and share this video from Warm Soul Stories. Because here, we don't just tell stories. We remember the ones the world forgot. We honor quiet heroes. And sometimes, the softest voices carry the strongest echoes. See you in the next story, right here on Warm Soul Stories.